there was a little bit of breaking news. So we had to, we're a couple of minutes late here, but we're getting in here because, of course, the news just broke via the Twitter that quarterback Tyler Buchner, Notre Dame quarterback, has officially entered the transfer portal. How it was basically stated in his little message in his graphic on Twitter was that he is entering the portal and seeing what options are out there for him. So doesn't necessarily mean foregone that he will no longer be with the program, but it's a tough
Ryan,
it was back from.
It was much different than most portal announcements. In most portal announcements, I want to thank you for the time, but I'm out of here, basically. And Tyler didn't do that. His was, after talking to Coach Freeman, obviously there's, get to come back. And I could come back. And I mean, for Notre Dame, it makes sense. You want Tyler Buchner back. You want Tyler Buchner part of your team because, number one, you want to keep that competition rolling. Yes, you anticipate Sam Hartman being the starter. It was hilarious. I'll get into that later. But anyway, we've been saying from the beginning, you're bringing in Sam Hartman to start, but Tyler Buchner's, a play away from being the guy. I think Tyler Buchner's presence makes Sam Hartman better, which in turn makes the Notre Dame team better. Yep. If Sam Hartman does go down, then you step in Tyler Buchner, and then Tyler Buchner stays. He still has 2 years of eligibility left after this season where he could be the starting quarterback. And, I'm surprised, but not surprised he left. I'm surprised from the standpoint of I had just convinced myself that, he was going to see it through. He's so close to graduating. There's no way Tyler, who I know values academics a great deal, is going to leave Notre Dame before getting his degree. There's just no way that's going to happen. That's what I told myself. But I'm also not surprised from the standpoint of I did have some people tell me that he was going to jump in a portal. And I was just hoping that they were wrong, honestly, because I'd hoped that he would stick it out. I'm so tired of every kid that just doesn't win a job leaving. I just despise the transfer portal. It's not that I'm so much against the kids doing it. It's the system that we've created that allows them to do it. And, it frustrates me a great deal. It really does frustrate me a great deal. But this is Tyler's decision, and he's going to have to, live with whatever that decision is. I don't anticipate him coming back, Ryan. I mean, I've heard a couple schools mentioned. I would anticipate him looking, obviously, at the West Coast, but I think with his family situation, he doesn't have to only look at the West Coast. They can see him play anywhere. But, I mean, there's a couple scenarios out west that could make some sense, Ryan, and I think those are I don't think Cal makes a lot of sense. UCLA, I'll tell you this. I was thinking about this because I was thinking last couple of days that if he left, where would he look? Say, boy, if UCLA didn't get Dante Moore, that would have been the perfect place for him to go. Playing for Chip Kelly. But obviously Dante Moore there, he's not going to look at them and they're not going to look at him. USC doesn't have a need at quarterback. Arizona State obviously is good. Arizona, I believe Jaden Delorius back, correct?
Yes.
I don't know if that makes sense. Cameron Ward's back at Washington State. Michael Penix at Washington. And then you kind of get into Oregon State. They're both set. It comes down to really, if he's going to look out west, it's either go smaller and go back home and go to San Diego State, which I don't know if that makes a lot of sense for him, or look at Stanford and Cal. Cal makes no sense. That's a bad roster, and I just don't know if that's a great ideal situation. And then Stanford with their new coach and the new offense that they're bringing.
He would be interesting in Troy Taylor. He'd be interesting with Troy Taylor a little bit.
Yeah. And then also, they've got quarterback problems at Sacramento. I mean, Sacramento State. That's where Troy Taylor came from. They've got problems at quarterback, in my opinion, for them. And so it'll be interesting. I mean, that's an offense that runs a lot. It's an offense that I don't know that their quarterbacks ran a ton last year, Ryan. Actually, no, they did. They had two. The one kid ran a lot. The other kid didn't.
Asher O'Hara, former Middle Tennessee State kid, he ran a lot, and then the other kid was kind of an immobile guy.
Dunaway was the drop back guy. Yeah, that's remember. But he's got that in the offense, but the quarterback wasn't the leading rusher. It's an offense that I think would fit Tyler's skill set really well. I think that would make a lot of sense to me. And then, of course, he can look at other conferences as well. There's going to be people bringing up Alabama and because of Tommy Rees. I don't know that I see that one being an option. I think with Ty Simpson and with Dylan Lonergan, who I really like. Ty Simpson's a nice – he's a good quarterback. I think he's a tad overrated. from like being a borderline 5-star for some people. But I think, talking to some sources, I think that they love Dylan Lonergan as well. And I don't know if Tyler wants to go there and compete, because he's not going to just be handed the job. You don't leave Notre Dame to go compete somewhere else. You're going somewhere where you're going to be the guy. And in Alabama, he's not going to be handed that job at Alabama. He'd have to earn it, and that would make no sense for Tyler to do that. It would make zero sense for Tyler to do that. And you say, well, he knows the offense there. Yeah, I know he knows the offense there, but he's still going to have to compete. You're not just going to hand him – if Notre Dame wasn't willing to hand Sam Hartman the job, who's far more accomplished than Tyler Buchner, that's not a shot at Tyler. It's just the reality. One kid's got 3 starts. The other guy's got like 45 starts, right?
Yeah. Then
Alabama's certainly not going to hand Tyler Buckner. I mean, Alabama's a school where they made Mac Jones and Tua Tagovailoa sit on the bench, for some time. They're not going to just hand Tyler Buckner the job. So for Tyler, if I'm advising him, that wouldn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't care how much he may like Coach Reese or whatever. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for me. There's some other schools he could go to. It'd be hilarious as if he went to Wake Forest. Like, that would be absolute. Yeah. I don't see that being an option, but the reality is, Ryan, I don't see this ending up with him coming back to Notre Dame. And if I'm Notre Dame, the thing is, well, what do I got to tell this kid to come back, other than just, we love you and we see a role for you, and you're going to be the guy for 2 years after this, potentially. That's really it. You can't make him any promises for next year. That would be unfair to Sam Hartman. It'd be unfair to Sam, because I don't know that you can keep those promises. So I think it's more just about, hey, we love you and we think you have a bright future here. Stick it out, learn, develop your game this season. And then you've got 2 years left to start. I mean, that's the only pitch that they can give. And then if you're Tyler, okay, what are your goals? Do you only want to be a quarterback for 2 more years and then go pro because of your injuries? If that's the goal, then okay, it would make sense to transfer. But if not, then I just don't love the idea of him leaving. But we can talk about, Ryan, potential of him coming back, but I just think that's sort of as of right now, a bit of a waste of our time, to be completely honest with you.
It is. I mean, the minute I saw it, Brian, I didn't even consider, honestly, that like he could come back. And I know the options are on the table, so it's something you have to at least talk about for a second. But I mean, my thought process on this is, quite simple, right? Anytime you have a quarterback battle and one is perceived to be behind the 8 ball in that quarterback battle after a spring, I think that there's going to be some urge to making the move, right? So I understood it.
In today's era, yes.
Yes, I understood it, and I wasn't shocked by the move. I was just disappointed, Like, I'm still very high on the talent that Tyler Buchner has, and I was kind of setting up in my mind, I'm like, if he really buys in, right? He buys in, backs up Sam Hartman for a year as a redshirt sophomore, then you're talking about 2 years, at least 1 year of being the starter potentially at the University of Notre Dame, maybe 2 more years.
If he doesn't play well next year, then sure, he could get beat out. But like CJ Carr's not coming in as a freshman, and Kenny Minchie's not going to go into 2025 and supplant Tyler Buchner if Tyler Buchner's really good in 2024. It's not going to work that way. But this is the decision he made. There's a lot of schools still looking for quarterbacks, Ryan. A lot of schools looking for quarterbacks. I think TCU
always will be.
TCU still, was hot in the market. There's a lot of teams that were looking for quarterbacks in the transfer portal that are still looking, and so we'll see kind of how it pans out, see how it plays out. But I don't see him coming back to Notre Dame. So what does this mean for Notre Dame, Ryan? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. This
is a blow. I don't care. Look, there's people that just don't like Tyler in the chat. I get it. Whatever. I don't really care to hear what you're having to say about that. It's not someone who has questions about whether or not Tyler can be the guy. That's a different story. I mean, those are valid questions. He's had 3 starts. He was okay in one, really good at another, even though he still threw a couple, 3 picks in that game, but he was still really good. And then in the other the middle start, he was bad. So there are legitimate questions about, can Tyler be the guy? I have my opinion about it, but me saying, yes, Tyler Buchner can still be that dude is an opinion based on his talent, not based on what we've seen from him over the course of his career. That's fair. So if someone wants to say, hey, I just there's a guy in the chat, Ant VR, made a comment. He goes, I just don't see it with Tyler. Like, this is a guy that has more career interceptions than he has starts. And I'm like, that's fair. I mean, I don't agree with the take, but I think it's fair to have that concern about, can Tyler be the guy?
Sure.
But I think what everyone should be able to agree on, and if you don't agree with this, then I think it's more of a personal issue that you have, is that Tyler Buchner being the next guy in line behind Sam Hartman is way better than any other option that they have right now at quarterback. And so in that regard, it's a blow. I mean, you just lost your starting quarterback last year in 2022 in the fourth quarter of the second game of the year. Second game, right? We saw in 2015, the starting quarterback got hurt and went out for the year in the second game of the year.
Yeah.
Again, second game of the year. So from 2015 to now, we have twice seen Notre Dame starting quarterback get hurt in the first 2 games of the year to season-ending injury, right? Ian Book was the most durable quarterback that Notre Dame has had in a long time. And that to me is the biggest praise I have for Ian Book. He missed that one start his first year against Florida State. Remember, he had the broken ribs. After that, Ian Book, he answered the bell every week. That's a bit of an anomaly from previous starting quarterbacks, because if you go back before Ian Book, obviously Deshaun Kaiser was the starter for a full year, but he got benched at one point in time because of his play, and probably should have been benched a couple other times because of his play and attitude. If you look at before that, in 2015, Malik Zaire goes down in game 2 for the year. In 2014, Everett Golson kind of gets benched because he ends up not playing well down the stretch. 2013, if you remember, Tommy Rees gets knocked out of the USC game early, and Andrew Hendricks comes in and it's just like run the clock out. They win 14-7. 2012, Everett gets hurt against Stanford and he misses the BYU game. And then in 2011, obviously Dane Christ is the starter. He ends up faltering. You bring in Tommy Rees. But then Tommy gets knocked out of the USC game, if you remember, and they had to bring Dane in. And then 2010, Dane gets knocked out of the Michigan game, and they have to play Nate Montana and true freshman Tommy Rees. Remember that? And then fast forward to November against Tulsa, and Dane gets knocked out for the year in the Tulsa game. Jimmy Clausen basically misses almost all the Purdue game. You have to bring him off the bench to rally the team late against Purdue in 2009, right? So we've been here before.
Yes.
That we've seen a lot of this at Notre Dame. Last year, Bryce Young goes down, and they have to play Jalen Milroe for 2 games, right?
2 games,
Part of one to replace him, and then I think he started the next. And then I think, so we have seen this before, whether it be injury or poor play. I'm not necessarily concerned about the poor play part with Sam Hartman. You're not going to bench Sam Hartman because he has a bad game. You say, hey, get back on the horse and keep going. And so, but the fact is, injuries happen as football. Sam Hartman missed last year's opener because of a medical issue.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen? So if you can't understand that this is a loss for Notre Dame, because even if you don't view Tyler as a starter, which is a fair discussion to have, we can have that debate one of these days. But I think, to me, it's a concern. It's a depth concern at that position, because now you have Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchey. Yeah. I think the world of Kenny Minchey, but I don't think he's ready to play. And guess what? Kenny Minchey missed like half of his senior season with a shoulder injury.
Yeah.
And Steve Angeli, Steve Angeli, I don't believe has 3,000 career yards of high school football, passing yards in his high school football career. He's just, to me, not that guy. He's not that. And I think Steve Angeli could eventually be a really good backup quarterback, but not as a redshirt freshman, in my opinion. It's more junior, senior season. But now he's a play away from being the starter, unless Kenny Minchey, who's a true freshman, can beat him out. Maybe that happens, but I was hoping that Kenny Minchey wouldn't have to play this year. Now he's going to have to grow up really fast and be ready to play. And it's not an ideal scenario. So you're now going to have a battle for the backup quarterback job, in my opinion, in the summer and fall. And so it puts Notre Dame in a tough spot, to where if Sam Hartman stays healthy, they're fine. Although, again, I would argue that having Tyler Buchner helps Sam Hartman. But as long as he's healthy, you're fine. But if he goes down, it's going to be a really, fingers crossed, every time Sam Hartman gets hit, basically, is like, oh gosh. Every time he gets sacked, I'm like, oh, God, please get up. And that's pretty much where I'm going to be with that. Yeah. So, I mean, that's where it impacts Notre Dame, Ryan, is that right there. There's a chance that this move could not mean a thing to Notre Dame. They could end up being totally fine because Sam stays healthy and he is who we think he is.
Sure.
But if he goes down, then this could potentially wreck Notre Dame season to a degree. Now, are they going to be a bad team? No, because I think they're better equipped everywhere else to carry the quarterback more than they were last year.
Sure.
With the roster and different things that they can do. An RPO offense can better protect the quarterback. They've got the run game, should still be pretty darn good. All those type of things. But it to me, it eliminates your national championship hopes, your playoff hopes is what it eliminates if Sam Hartman goes down either in a key game or early in the season or at any point for an extended period of time. That's where I think this hurts Notre Dame quite a bit.
Well, and I think that there's two layers to this, obviously, right? Like I hit on a little bit that I was hopeful that you buy in and then maybe eventually you're the starting quarterback in 2024 and beyond, right? Like that was my hope for a guy like Tyler Buchner because he's dynamic. He's a talented kid who has a full-time quarterback coach now or did have a full-time quarterback coach in Gino Guidugli. You're excited about the potential of him developing under him. At least you were. But Brian, I think that the immediacy is more of the issue. And I think that you coined that perfectly. This is in most cases, right? College and NFL. I think this is a little bit of a similar pathway. You don't necessarily need a guy that is a difference maker as a backup quarterback, but what you do need is a little bit of a known commodity, right? Like you want to know what you have behind you in case the bad happens, right? In case an injury happens, in case a guy gets, knocked out of a football game and the guy has to finish or got knocked out of a couple weeks or a season-ending injury, God forbid. With Tyler Buchner, I know the last time I saw Tyler Buchner play, he beat an SEC team and he had 5 touchdowns. Like that's more of a known commodity. I still don't think he's fully known because he still has a lot of development to go to. But right now, where you are on this roster is you have Kenny Minchie as a true freshman. You have Steve Angeli as a redshirt freshman. We know last year we were hoping that there would be a couple games last year in blowout fashion that maybe Steve Angeli would get a little bit of game time, right? Get to throw the ball around a little bit. That never happens. So right now, your backup quarterback option, barring some roster movement in this offseason, I don't know if that's going to be a conversation piece at all, is you have a quarterback room outside of Sam Hartman that has never thrown a pass on the college level. That is a fact, right? So there is an unknown commodity behind Sam Hartman right now.
Now, you know who else had no career passing attempts going into his second year, and he was phenomenal, was Bryce Young. Well, no, Bryce Young played, but C.J. Stroud.
Yeah.
But Steve Angeli is not C.J. Stroud.
Yes.
Right? And that's the thing is I know some people think he's a great quarterback, and I hope that they're right. I hope the people that think Steve Angeli is that dude are right, because I don't think that he is. I think he's a good backup quarterback. That's what I think that he is.
Yeah.
But it's not so much the lack of experience is problematic, Ryan, unless you're a dude.
Yep.
And that he's not that, in my opinion. And Kenny Minchie's a guy that I like a lot, but he's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not Jalen Hurts as a player where he can come in and play as a freshman and be fine. Maybe he can, but I hope that he doesn't have to be in that situation. And I'm as high on Kenny Minchie as just about anybody. But he was not a guy that I saw as, hey, can he come in, play right away? That's not what I saw from him. I also think it's hilarious that some of the people that have just done nothing but complain about how Sam needs to be the guy and Tyler's not good and all that are the same ones complaining about him leaving now, Tyler Buchner leaving now.
It always happens that way, man. It's just very conflicting viewpoints sometimes.
I do want to end this segment with this part, Ryan, because we could talk for an hour about Buckner the way you and I are when we get to talking, and I think we've kind of covered it. This was a problem for Notre Dame depth wise. And I still like Tyler as a young man. I wish him the best. I just wish he would have stuck it out. So I have no shots for him. I think it was a bad decision, but I have no disrespect for him personally or ill will towards him personally. I just wish he would have stayed through. Katie Keevers has an interesting comment that I want to end it with, Ryan, because one of the things Tyler Buchner said was, after talking with Coach Freeman, it's good to know that I have the option to return. And Katie Keever said, hey, Brian, how do you feel about Freeman leaving the door open for him to return? And then she follows up with, seems like it can set a dangerous precedent. Are you committed to this team or not? And I actually agree with Katie here.
I do too.
I understand why Notre Dame is doing that, because Marcus Freeman and this staff are very well aware of everything that we just said.
Yes.
Everything that we just said. And if they had confidence that Steve Angeli was ready to slide into that spot right now and be that dude, they would not be leaving this door open for Tyler Buchner. Because I'm going to tell you something right now. There have been some other players like Lorenzo Styles, for example, that said, I want to leave. And the staff was like, okay, good luck.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And this is a different deal. And it's not because they love Tyler. That's obviously if the kid had a crap attitude and you didn't like him personally, you wouldn't leave the door for him to come back. So I think number one, what this says to me is number one, that Tyler has done everything right. He has had the right attitude. He has competed. He is a good teammate. And it says that number one. But number two, I think it speaks volumes about their concerns about the depth chart and the readiness of what's behind him, of what's behind Sam Hartman. Having said that, I do think there's a lot of merit to what Katie said, Ryan, which is you're going to let him explore. If he doesn't like it, he's going to come back. Like, what message does that send? If you jump in the portal, best of luck to you, right? When you make that decision, best of luck to you, because you're telling us that you don't want to be here.
Yes.
I would, if I was I don't care who you are. My personal stance would be as a head coach, once you make the decision to go in the portal, understand that you've made the decision to leave this football program. That's how I would view it, because I think you set that precedent of, now all of a sudden, will you let Tyler do it? Why can't I do it? Why can't I jump in and see what's out there for me and decide, I didn't like those options better. I'm going to come back now. I don't know if that's necessarily the story that I would want to be telling.
Well, I mean, Katie, it's a great point and great question too, because full transparency, you pull down the curtain a little bit. Brian, right before we started the show, I said, if I was the coach, I don't know if I would take him back. And that's just my opinion, because like you said, you love Tyler. Sure, he's a great kid. But to your point, there is a precedence that is set that if you say, yeah, you can come back, and then he actually decides to come back, what's stopping player X, player Y from doing the exact same thing and thinking that they can do that constantly? Like, there is a precedence that is set. I just think that that's a slippery slope, man. I think it's a really slippery slope.
But I think the precedent has already been set whether he comes back or not.
A little bit, yeah.
And that's my concern. Like, I would have said, hey, man, what I would have asked Tyler to do is not to say it publicly.
Yeah, keep it behind closed doors.
Yes, keep it behind closed doors, and then say, hey, man, look, just tell people you had a change of heart and you want to come back, and that we'll embrace you with open arms.
And I know, and someone just said that, and I just, if I can, I would just love to pull this comment up, because I just want to point to something that I think is drastically different. Because Garen Knutson said, in real life corporate America, people look at different jobs all the time while currently employed. Yes, Garen, yes, you're right.
America.
They do.
This is a football team.
And also, Brian, you employ me. Is it okay if I tell you, hey, man, I'm going to look at other jobs and while you still employ me? Like, is that okay?
I'm going to call Irish Illustrated and see what's going on. Or I'm going to call, the NFL, some NFL draft, something like that, and say, hey, I'm going to go talk to them about a job. I'd be like, all right, man, good luck to you.
Exactly.
You're not just going to be like, you better get. That's one thing. That was it. Charlie Weiss said that, or was it Brian? It was Brian Kelly, I think. That also Brian Kelly said that. Charlie Weiss said about recruits, but Brian Kelly said that if you go interview for a lateral move, now Ryan, here's the thing. Like, if you were to come to me and say, hey, Brian, I have an opportunity. This network reached out to run my own site.
Right.
That would be different, because you and I have talked about this when I hired you, that your goals aren't in 20 years to be my partner in crime on this site. You have aspirations that we're working together to build you to someday. And if you end up staying here forever, great. But if not, I understand that. And if those opportunities come, then that's mission accomplished. That's a positive. That's different than this, right? This is like, to me, this is like if a guy wants to test the NFL draft waters and come back, totally fine with that. That's a different deal. That's a promotion. This is more of a, the example that I would use is more of where I'm dating someone and I just, I like you and we're good, but I just want to go sleep around a little bit and just see, what else is out there and see if there's anything else I like. And if there's nothing better, I'll come back.
Right.
I know what my wife would have done if I did that when we were dating. I wouldn't be married to her right now. I'll just tell you that right now. You know what I mean? And vice versa. So I understand where he's coming from. But again, this isn't corporate America. You know what else can happen in corporate America? You can fire people.
Exactly.
Right? If you don't like what they're doing, you just fire them. You know,
and I have no problem with Tyler making this decision. It's his decision. We're
None.
just talking about the decision that he made. That's all.
Personally I would not have advised him to make the decision, but that's what you do. It's like with anything, right? There's times where my dad has advised me on things and I make a different decision than what he advised, and he still loves me and respects me and has my back. He just thinks that I should have gone a different way. That's part of caring about somebody, right?
Yep.
But it doesn't mean that I think he's a bad kid. I think that he's a big idiot. He's dumb. I don't think any of those things. I think the best thing for Tyler would have been to stay. He sees it otherwise. He's a grown up now. I think Tyler's 21 now. Right. So this is he's making a grown up decision, and I want nothing but the best for him as a person. He's actually only 20. He's still only 20. He'll turn 21 in November. So he's actually younger than I thought he was. But point is, Ryan, it's not about personal like or dislike. It's about I have a program to run and I have a precedent that I need to make sure it doesn't get set.
Yeah.
And that's my issue. And once it's announced that he even has the option of coming back, what's to stop some other starter or number 2 guy? What's to stop a running back, right? I'll just say it. What's to stop, hypothetically speaking, since he's talked a lot about, or there's been rumors about him transferring in the past, what if Logan Diggs decides, hey, I want to put my name in the portal now, see what's out there, and if there's not a promise of a starting job, I'll go back to Notre Dame. Right. It's a lot easier to do that now, knowing that Notre Dame has set this precedent for you to come back. And then if you tell him no, you can't do that, he's gonna be like, well, hold on a second. You let Tyler Buchner do that. Why can't I do that? And now it starts creating some of those issues. So that's the only problem I have with all of this, Ryan. I don't have a problem with Tyler doing what he's gonna do. I don't agree with it, but it's cool. Yeah, I respect it. I respect Marcus Freeman for being willing to work with Tyler in this regard. I'm just concerned of what this decision might do from a precedent standpoint. That's my only problem with this whole thing, to be completely honest.
I 100%. I think from a personal decision perspective, it's Tyler's decision to make. I hope he goes wherever he goes and he kills it, man. Like I hope he does tremendous. Like I have no issue with Tyler whatsoever. To your point, I think there's a precedence issue. And then when we talk about the immediacy of this roster, you start to get a little hairy, and there starts to get some question marks, obviously, with the backup quarterback position. So that's the only, that's the talking point for me, is that it does hurt your roster immediately. Yes. Obviously.
I want to bring up one thing, Ryan, that was also mentioned that was also asked, and we'll kind of close the book on the Tyler Buchner quarterback thing.
Yep.
David Lowe asked, Brian, do you think the staff takes 2 quarterbacks in this class now? It's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that right now. And there's two ways they could go. Number one is you go to the portal again next year. That's on the table. Now, the question about going to the portal next year, Ryan, right now is on the table. The question is twofold. What are you going to the portal for?
Right. What type?
Are you going to the portal for a starter because, Kenny and Steve aren't ready? Or are you going to the portal for more of what UCLA did, which is an insurance policy in case my young guy's not ready?
College Lee. Yeah.
Right. That kind of guy. Maybe a guy that understands he's not an NFL quarterback, wants to get into coaching, wants to get his master's degree. There's guys out there like that. You go get some kid who's an Ivy League kid potentially and say, hey, look, man, you're a good football player. You can get out of some games. We want to bring you in as, a depth guy. We need leadership. We need some experience in the room. Because this is the other thing too, is if Sam Hartman stays healthy this year, you're going to have very little on leadership experience at quarterback. Prove it, like as far as being in front of the room. You bring in a veteran. Hey, look, between CJ and Kenny and Steve, those guys are probably going to be our starters. We love their ability, but we want to bring in a veteran just to stabilize things and just in case. Or is it, hey, we're looking for another Sam Hartman next year because those guys aren't ready.
Sure.
And we don't want to put that much pressure on CJ Carr as a true freshman. And then essentially what that would then turn into is, okay, CJ is going to end up being the guy. This is his bridge year to learn under the guy we brought in, and then you move on. So the other option is obviously bringing in 2 high school kids. Now, this is an interesting one because what you're not going to do is go out there and try to get a top 150 player, in my opinion. Yeah. What I think you need to do is you need to sit down with CJ Carr and say, hey, listen, here's the deal. We don't want to have to bring in another transfer guy a year from now. you're still our future. You're still our guy.
Yeah.
But we're going to go out and try to get another quarterback, a kid that's got some ability, a kid that's going to come in, be a little bit of a project type of kid.
Yes.
And or a solid kid, just a good steady player. And that kid's going to understand that, look, this is what your role is. You're coming to Notre Dame to, yes, you're going to get a chance to compete because everyone gets a chance to compete. And if that kid, it's like the Redskins did not draft Gus Frerotte to beat out Heath Schuler.
Yeah.
It ended up happening. They needed depth. They brought him in to be a depth guy. It ended up working out that way, but that's not the intention behind it. As long as
the Redskins also didn't draft Kirk Cousins necessarily to be the starter of RG3, but the same thing happened in the same draft.
It's a good point. Yeah. It's a good point.
Yeah.
So I believe, heck, the Redskins, I believe, signed Doug Williams to be the backup to Jay Schrader. And Jay Schrader got hurt, if I remember correctly, back in, was it 87? I could be a little off on that. It's been a long time ago. I was 9. But I believe that to be the case. The point being, as long as you're honest with CJ before you do it, I think CJ will completely understand and probably help you get that kid.
Yeah.
Knowing CJ, I personally would rather go that route. Because here's the problem. If you bring in a portal kid a year from now, then those kids know whoever's not the starter knows that I'm now buried because the backup, this guy came in to at least be number 2.
Sure.
And now all of a sudden, okay, so you're bringing a portal kid and you got CJ, but then what? Steve and Kenny leave, and now you're in this
cycle.
Or I would say, hey, stop the bleeding with a second quarterback in 24, and sit down with CJ, let him know, and then ask him for help. Who have you worked out with? Who have you been in a camp with that you think would want to come play with you? CJ on 7-on-7 and all. I mean, I guarantee you CJ has a couple kids in mind. Hey, coach, I know this guy. We worked out 11-on-11. He's a great guy. He's getting looked at by some MAC schools right now, but kid might jump at a chance to get a Notre Dame education. There are kids out there like that.
100%.
And so I would rather go get a kid like that, maybe a Sun Belt caliber kid, because those kids sometimes pan out to be pretty flipping good too, right? There's a lot of Power 5 teams trying to get Sun Belt kids and Mountain West kids and Conference USA kids and MAC kids to transfer to their schools because those kids turned out to be pretty good football players. So that's where that personally, David, that's the route I would go. But if you're going to do that, you have to do it right. And you're not like, hey, let's bring in Julian Sayin also, right? It's not that.
Right.
It's a different direction, in my opinion. And so it's going to require upfront honesty. And then I seriously think the strategic way to do this is to ask CJ for help. Who do you think? Who have you come across that? And then I'd say, hey, look, here's 3 kids that we like. We want you to get to know this kid. And you let us know if you think he's got the attitude that it takes to come here and compete and know that even if he doesn't get it, he's going to stick it out. And then that's what you do, in my opinion. That's the route I would go, personally, to fill this void. Ryan, thoughts on that as we wrap this thing up?
I mean, it's interesting. I know I can think of a couple names just off the top of my head or that I would, that qualify as kind of high upside quarterbacks in 2024 that, again, it's not a foregone conclusion that they are that type of guy. But I mean, to your point, Brian, it's like you see kids pop up every year, man. I mean, Georgia State has a quarterback right now named Darren Granger, who was like a Furman kid originally. And like, he's a 6'3" toolsy kid, It's just like a kid like that is very interesting. I think regardless of what route you go, and I believe you agree with this, please tell me if you don't, but there needs to be obviously a deep conversation on the staff about what your trajectory is here, right? What your plan is, and you need to be consistent with it. Because I think if you start dipping your toes into every market and it's kind of a muddled conversation or what you're trying to accomplish, I think that's where people could start questioning decisions, right? It's like CJ's, like if you talk to CJ Carr, for instance, and you just kind of say like, oh no, we're not going to recruit another quarterback. And then there's whispers out there as quarterbacks like, I've been talking to Notre Dame recently. It's like, you're not being honest about that, friend. Like there's not honesty. So I think that the staff just needs to be able to sit down and really understand what's the next step, right? Is there an immediate fix that we can get? Is this we'll figure this out before the 2024 season? Is this a transfer route? Is this a high school route? regardless of what the decision is, because I think that both sides have merit to it, the staff has to be on the same page, and everyone in the program needs, all quarterbacks I'm talking about mostly, need to understand what are you trying to accomplish moving forward now, because I just don't think that you can mix the markets, because that's just going to make people not trust the vision, if that makes sense.
Agree. You and I are going to have a fun conversation after this show is over about teams looking for a quarterback, because there's some teams looking for quarterbacks that took transfer portal guys that aren't panning out.
Yes.
Florida. Excuse me.
The Graham Mertz slander on the podcast, man.
And I think Wisconsin is gonna regret thinking Danner Mordecai is that guy as well.
Oh man, he looked bad in the spring game.
Yeah.
I saw some of
shocker.
I know it was raining and everything, but
but this is what I said when they got him. I was like, this kid looked good in the AAC, but look what happened every time he played a Power 5 team, right? Yeah. And he's not that guy. So that's it. So that's going to do it for this part. We're gonna dive into our normal show next, but obviously before we do, y'all know what to do. Do us a favor and hit that like button for us, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, and make sure you stay tuned in to what we have next on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.